Their first major obstacle is to cross the treacherous Mara River. And this morning, Jean is in the middle of the action.
I'm following a group of wildebeest. This group has now grown and it's constantly getting bigger. Off to my right are still streams of wildebeest coming out of the hills. Last night there was a huge amount of rain in this area, and that's those thunder showers that's now pulling down these wildebeest onto the riverbank.
This journey is their destiny, but it is fraught with dangers. About 250,000 wildebeest will die over the next year of natural causes like thirst, hunger, or exhaustion. And many more will die at the hands of predators, such as lions or crocodiles, that wait along the route. They approach the river crossing with caution. They sense the lurking dangers. But their instinct to move is stronger than their fear. Soon it becomes a mad rush. Now there are thousands jumping in. There are over 2 million wildebeest and zebra. It will take several weeks at many different crossing points before they have passed. The Mara's crocodiles hope to get in one last feed.
This was amazing. Just towards the end of the crossing, there was this enormous croc that got hold of a yearling and literally just took the entire head of this wildebeest in his mouth, and all of them submerged, and that's the last we ever saw of all of them.
The wildebeest migrate between two grassland areas, the Masai Mara in the north where they mate, and the short grass plains in the south where they give birth. They will be congregating on each grassland for approximately 3 months before the rains shift, and they begin to migrate out. The Tanzanian side of the Masai Mara is called the Lamai Wedge, and it's unique because it has unusually high numbers of predators in the area. In the open grasslands, Jean will have an easier time spotting them. To get there, Jean will have to brave the river too, but there's a problem. The bridge is flooded. Just a few days earlier, a vehicle tried to cross but got caught in the strong currents and plunged into the crocodile-infested waters, stranding 5 men. Despite the danger, Jean decides to go anyway. If he waits, the area could clear out of wildebeest, and he will miss his best chance to see the lions in action. Crossing the bridge is nerve-wracking. The trick is not to look down. If he does, he could begin to drift. Jean's experience serves him well. He makes it safely across to the Lamai Wedge.
When looking for lions, the easiest way to find them is to look for these clearings in between the herds of wildebeest. This time of the morning they would more than likely be moving, or they already be on the kill. But about an hour or 2 from now it would get too warm and they would be searching for shade. But for now we're focusing on the plains. I would get to a bit of elevation and then scan with binoculars and see if we can pick them out.
It's October, and the herds are in the midst of dealing with their first and biggest obstacle, crossing the Mara River, where slippery rocks, rough currents, and crocodiles are some of the deadly obstacles that will claim thousands of the animals. The wildebeests that make it across will continue south and to the next phase of the journey, the largest mass birthing grounds on the planet. And Jean wants to be there to witness the births. Before the migration moves, Jean wants to observe predator behavior. The best place to see this is in the area north of the Mara River, known as the Lamai Wedge. As the millions of wildebeest cross the Lamai, large predators come out in force.
When looking for lions, the easiest way to find them is to look for these clearings in between the herds of wildebeest. But for now, we're focusing on the plains. I would get to a bit of elevation and then scan. This time of the morning, they would more than likely be moving, or they already be on the kill.
Jean is looking for one of the clear signs of a kill: birds of prey circling above the Serengeti.
We're coming up on some vultures that's sitting on a carcass of something, obviously more than likely a wildebeest. It looks quite fresh. Yeah, it's a wildebeest that's been killed, and it doesn't look like hyenas. It's more than likely lions that had their fill, and as the sun rose, the vultures would pick up these kills, and they came to completely clean it off and eat every small piece of meat.
With wildebeest kills scattered everywhere, Jean takes a closer look to see what he can learn about the predator behavior in the area.
What I'm seeing here is a clear indication of predators that's not very hungry. One can see that a very small part of the rib cage has actually been consumed. Nice signs of hyenas chewing this off, but also not hungry hyenas, because had they been hungry, they would have eaten this entire rib cage. Just as for a hyena, it takes no effort to consume thick bones such as this. Other things that point out to me are the skin that remains, the legs, and generally when there's huge competition for food in an area, hyenas would come in and grab a piece of leg and would run off. So the entire carcass would disperse over a very big area. So this points out to me that there potentially wasn't a lot of conflict around this carcass because animals are not hungry. There's food all over this system.
I've got some hyenas in a kill here. It's a fresh kill. They all kind of feeding quite ferociously. There's about 5-6 of them, and a lot of them are still kind of pups. What's very interesting is there's a silverback jackal that's constantly darting in and trying to take a bite, but these hyenas are having none of that, and they tend to kind of chase him off. But a little bit away, it seems where the actual kill happened, there's some skin and pieces of meat lying around. There's a big group of vultures there, and the jackal is also focused. There he's coming in now. Yeah, he's getting his head right between the legs of the hyenas. It's an extremely brave act for something so small, because it will just take one bite of a hyena to kill him. They tolerate him up to a certain point, and then there's this half-hearted attempt of chasing him away. And, he would just kind of scatter away a couple of meters and then come back immediately again. And there's one incident where he grabbed a big piece of skin, and I think that was enough for the hyenas, and then they chased him around the bush a couple of times. Interesting, these hyenas will consume most of that carcass. They've got incredibly powerful jaws, huge carnassial teeth, where when lions would feed on the kill, they would not eat the bones as much as hyenas would do that, and most of the rib cage is already gone. There's so much food around. They are fat, very, very well fed, and they must eat once or twice a day. And it's easy for a hyena to go 3 or 4 days. This is definitely not out of hunger.
purely out of greed.
Not all the predators are hunting wildebeest. Jean comes across another resident of the Lamai Wedge, a smaller species of the cat family.
There's a serval cat here. You can see it moving over there now. It's very, very well camouflaged, but you can just see its back moving through the tall grass. Yeah, I came around a corner and there's a open clearing in between all of these wildebeest that indicated for me that there's a predator around. Now, I don't think this single serval created this clearing to possibly some lions around, but this serval is down in a drainage ditch. He's clearly out hunting, and in these grasslands they would be after things like mice and birds, and they've got an incredible leap, so they will have grass birds shoot up into the sky and they pretty much follow them up and take them out of the air.
Jean pushes on. He's working his way up through the plains along the boundary of the resident pride's territory.
There's a lioness in a rocky outcrop in front of me. This is the perfect place for a pride of lions to be hanging out on these plains. It's first of all shady, but it's also a great natural observation point. And I'm just trying to, it's extremely rocky, so I'm just trying to get a bit closer and see what they are up to. They are quite relaxed. These must be very well-fed lions. The flip side, of course, is when the migration moves out and the grasses are tall, it is extremely hard for lions to make a kill. She's lying down. This is an old female. I can see her ears are all tatty. Very dark black nose. I actually see two of them. No, it's also a female. She's a bit younger.
It's getting towards midday, and Jean is not seeing any predators on the hunt. In this heat, it's likely that the predators are doing their hunting early in the morning when it's still cool. So Jean decides to go back to camp and start again early tomorrow when he hopes the lions will be on the prowl. So he heads back across the still flooded bridge to camp for the night. The following morning, he starts out at sunrise. Within minutes, he gets lucky. A pride of lions has made a kill.
These guys are our resident pride. They're living fairly close to camp. And they must be the most fortunate lions in the Serengeti at the moment, having their entire migration moving through. Every wildebeest in the area kind of move past here on these shorter grass. So the only thing they need to do is just lie up in this drainage area. And it's literally littered with carcasses. And they are the carcasses for wildebeest right now. Right now it's only the cubs feeding. There's quite a few cubs, two different ages, around 4 to 6 months. These cubs are now feeding into a bit of a game. And he's constantly trying to pull this carcass away from the rest of the group. It's also a good practice for later on in life.
Living on the Serengeti is a mixed blessing for the lions. During the migration, the resident prides eat well, but once the wildebeest have left the area, the lions have to survive on leaner times. The never-ending cycle of the wildebeest migration on the Serengeti is a story of instinct and survival. Wildlife expert and safari guide Jean du Plessis has been watching the most spectacular part of the journey, the mass crossing of the Mara River. As deadly as predators are, the river poses a greater danger to the wildebeest. Its fast-flowing currents can sweep a wildebeest downstream, or if the herds choose a bad crossing point, hundreds of the animals can die. Jean is with a herd in trouble.
This is like worst case scenario. This is a very bad place for them to cross. The far side is kind of piling up with bodies, and then these guys down below just cannot get out of the river because of all of these exits being just congested by dead animals. You know, as far as one look down the river, there's just bodies drifting all the way down, and that's going to get trapped down in a rapid a bit lower down. And there's still hundreds of thousands of wildebeest coming in behind me, waiting to cross here.
And for the young and adolescent wildebeest in the herd, crossing the Mara is especially dangerous.
For an adult wildebeest, it's one thing to cross a high, fast-flowing river like this, but it's a massive challenge for the younger ones. In February, March this year, a lot of new wildebeest were born, so they made the journey up into the Masai Mara, and they crossed a much lower river. So they went into the Mara, and now suddenly they're coming back facing these massive currents, and that's a huge challenge for an animal that's not even a year old yet. The majority of the carcasses that I can see here are actually yearlings of these young ones that just could not get through this deeper river. Also, by the time that a wildebeest calf reach about this stage, they've more than likely separated from their mothers. So they form these little groups or herds of calves. And a lot of times you'll have a yearling herd that will cross by themselves, and that can be catastrophic for an entire herd of that like that if they hit a river that is flowing as fast and deep as this right now. And you can see there's like hundreds of vultures and storks that's kind of sitting on top of this island and is now eating these dead animals. These vultures are the cleanup crews of the Serengeti, and without them, it would really just be a mess of rotting bodies. Big groups of vultures like this can consume thousands of kilograms of meat in one day, so they form a crucial part in the cleaning up of the Serengeti. It is very difficult for vultures to actually tear up the skin of these tough wildebeest, so they have to wait for the bodies to partly decompose. Luckily, we're sitting a little bit upwind from all of this because it must just smell incredibly bad as you go downwind from this.
The crossing was catastrophic for this group. But what is bad for one species is good for another. Although scavengers like vultures sometimes get a bad rap, the work they do is of vital importance to the Serengeti. If all these carcasses were left to rot, the entire ecosystem would be in danger of contamination from diseases that go along with the rot. Vultures feed on dead meat or carrion. They can strip a carcass in a few hours. Surprisingly, it's not lions that eat the most meat, but vultures. The birds eat 70% of the meat on the plains. There are 5 different kinds of vultures on the Serengeti. These are the Ruppel's griffon vultures, identified by white streaked feathers and yellow beaks. These vultures don't make their nests in trees, they lay their eggs on cliffs. The vultures congregate in an area several hours southeast of the Mara River. It's Maasai territory, and Jean is going to meet with a Maasai guide who will take him to the cliffs where these birds make their nests.
This gorge is called Okerian Gorge, and this is one of very few breeding sites for these Ruppel's griffon vultures. These cliffs behind me are white with their droppings, and they must have used this area to breed for thousands of years. And it's the ideal nesting site for them because it's not entirely flat cliffs. There's hundreds of these little ledges that makes the perfect nesting site, and a nest really isn't much more than a couple of rough sticks thrown into a heap, and that's where the female will lay her eggs. This couple will pair up for the breeding season and form a monogamous pair, and together they would raise the chicks. What's quite amazing about these vultures are that they need to make daily excursions into the Serengeti plains to feed, and At the moment, when the migration is down here in the short grass plains, it might only be about 50 kilometers. But as the migration moves northwards later on in the year, it can be hundreds and hundreds of kilometers in a return journey for them to go feed and come back to their chicks. It's interesting how they handle these huge journeys. It's not like they fly there and flap their wings. They would shoot up immediately from here into a high thermal. All around this gorge is extremely hot, so very effective thermals, taking them thousands of feet up into the sky, and they basically just glide down into the area the migration would be that time of year.
These vultures are the highest flying birds in the world. They soar at an altitude as high as a jumbo jet.
This huge amount of vultures around, there's feathers lying all over this gorge, and I picked up two here. This one here is a secondary feather, and this is a primary. These primaries are going at the edges of the wings, and that's what creates a lift for the bird when they flap their wings. And it's these secondaries that will keep the bird in the sky when it's actually soaring up in these thermals. The reason why birds do preening is they fix their feathers, where they bring these together and they stick them like Velcro. And this will create this solid platform for them to get up in the sky. This Rupel griffon vulture is one of the biggest birds in Africa. It's the second largest vulture, only rivaled by the Nubiums or the lappet-faced vulture. This is now where the gorge narrows, and when there's flash floods, this must be pretty deep. And quite incredible to think about that this gorge has been here for hundreds of thousands of years, and we are very close to the cradle of man, Olduvai Gorge. So some form of hominid must have been walking through here, getting water in the dry season, probably for the last 100,000 years. I'm quite a bit up into the gorge now, and this is one of the main reasons this gorge is so important for the Maasais. There's almost year-round water in the form of these pools and puddles that they can bring their livestock in to drink from. But they're also collecting this water to now take back to the village. This is pretty much the main purpose of a donkey, is that they can carry water out of such hard places down to the village. Apparently this water up here is more for human consumption, and the water down below would be for donkeys.
It's now been 3 months since the herds finished the most dangerous part of the trip, the crossing of the Mara River. All throughout the 3-month leg, the wildebeest have had to contend with predators. It is a war of attrition, but the first herds have made it through and begin to push out of the woodlands. The wildebeest are now heading to the southern shortgrass plains, where perhaps the most important event of the annual migration takes place. This is where the females give birth to more than 200,000 young over a 3-week period. It is the largest mass birth on the planet, and a spectacle that Jean does not want to miss.
It's incredible. We just arrived on the shortgrass plains, and with us are arriving this enormous herd of wildebeests. And they're all funneling through this gully right now, and the other side of the plain must be tens of thousands of wildebeest. The roads are clearly very wet, meaning there must have been a big thunder shower here last night, and that's the driving force for the migration. There's very little instinct in these guys. It's all about following the rain, and this is where it's raining right now. So last night they must have seen the thunder, smelled the rain in the water, And this is why they are moving into this area. And this is generally what pulls the wildebeest from the north to the south, are these thunder showers that move from the north down into this area. The grasses here are fantastic. Right now I'm not seeing any young calves with them, which is great for us, because giving us some great opportunity to potentially witness a birth. But some of these females are looking very round and ready to pop. I'm certain in the next week we will see some births.
Now, just being on the short grass plains does not guarantee Jean will be able to stay with the herds. There are millions of wildebeests, but they can move fast. The entire wildebeest herd can completely vacate an area overnight. There are some parts of the park that are off limits to tourists, including Jean. If the wildebeest go into one of these areas, Jean would miss the entire calving season. Jean has decided to base himself at sanctuary camps in a spectacular area known as Kusini. From the camp, he'll have the perfect vantage point to keep his eye on the migration. Its central location should keep Jean in striking distance when they begin dropping their young. But even the best thought-out plans are subject to approval by Mother Nature. Today, things are not looking good for Jean. A massive storm is rolling in, fueled by a tropical storm off Tanzania's coast. An entire month's rain falls overnight on the short grass plains, turning the entire area into a swamp. The rains have triggered the herds to move again, but the heavy dump has created a major problem. Reports say the roads are impassable and that vehicles are stranded all over the plains. If he waits, he could lose track of the herds. So Jean decides to brave the conditions. He realizes quickly this is going to be a tough day. Jean is driving on black cotton soil, which behaves a lot like ice.
The trick is to keep the car moving.
If he stops, he won't have the traction to get moving again.
Not good at all. However, we've got a hyena to our right. It's going to help us much right now. Next thing is to try and dig out these pockets so we can make ourselves a little bit of a runway to get out. Ideally, it'd be nice to find some wood to now put in front of the tires, and we just need to get moving again and get that momentum.
Jean has to dig out each tire. He lines the ruts with grass, hoping it will give him enough traction to get back on the road.
And I think we'll just stick with the motto of momentum. I'll probably get stuck down the road track. Can't really call this a road, can we?
Wildlife expert Jean du Plessis is following the wildebeest herds as they travel through the Serengeti on their year-long migration. They are just days away from the most important event in their yearly migration, where the wildebeest females give birth to 200,000 young over a 2 to 3 week period. It is the largest mass birth on the planet. A massive rainstorm swept through the area, flooding the short grass plains. With the rain, the wildebeests have moved out. Jean is in an area called Moru Koppies, where he hopes to see the mass births. While he waits for the advancing herds to arrive, he has time to explore the area's unique geology.
This area is known as Moru Koppies, and the word koppie is really a Dutch word that refers to these rocky outcrops